So the cockpit preparation check is basically a panel scan to make sure that all the switches and buttons are in the right place and indications are normal. We start on the overhead panel, and the general rule is to make sure that all of the white lights have been extinguished. The only exception to this really would be the fuel pumps, the master switches for which are here on the fuel panel. You can see they're selected off at the moment, and this is perfectly normal, and it's standard procedure to have the fuel pumps off until refueling has been completed, and refueling will be in process fairly shortly, so we're going to leave the fuel pumps off. Apart from that though, we will try and deselect any of the white indications on the overhead panel, and also check to make sure that all the switches and features are in the right place. So first of all, we're going to select the crew oxygen supply to on. Cockpit voice recorders we can test. We need the ground control selection on, and this ensures that the various cockpit activities are recorded while we're on the ground. The automatic logic of the system is to, I believe, start up when the first engine is started, so this ensures that ground operations are also recorded. The loudspeaker has to be on, the parking brake has to be on as well to perform the CVR test. If we select it, you can hear the beeping over the overhead speaker, and that shows that the test is satisfactory. The EVAC panel, we're looking to make sure that the switch is in captain, and we're going to turn the IRS mode selectors into nav. If we continue on now into the centre of the panel, we're looking at the exterior lights, and at this stage we want the navigation lights to be selected on. You'll notice there are two positions on the nav switch. The first position activates only the navigation lights, obviously the steady red and green lights on the wingtips, and the second position activates the logo light as well as the navigation lights, and the logo light obviously lights up the logo on the tailplane of the aircraft. But because we're in the middle of the day, we're going to save the bulbs and only use the navigation lights. The rest of the external lights should be off at this stage, they're not required. We want to check as well that the seatbelt signs, well, they'd usually be on, but again, because we're anticipating refueling fairly shortly, it's standard procedure to leave the seatbelt signs off until refueling is finished, and that's basically a safety precaution to make sure that in the event of an emergency situation involving the fueling, if we need to evacuate the aircraft, the passengers aren't belted in. Once the refueling is finished, we'll select the seatbelt signs on. The no smoking signs, however, can be left in auto, and that's the normal position to have them in. With most modern Airbuses, the auto position would mean that the no smoking signs are always left on. Incidentally, it's a strange quirk of the Airbus 320 that if you switch the no smoking sign to on rather than auto, it actually prevents the charge of the emergency lighting system batteries, which is an unusual little condition of the electrical system, but there we go. Also, at this stage we need to arm the emergency lights. They're always armed for normal operations, and you can see once we do that, the amber light is extinguished. Cabin pressure, we need at this stage for the landing elevation selection to be in auto, and then coming up to the air conditioning, we have fault lights in the packs. As we've said, that's normal because we don't have any bleed pressure at the moment, and the rest of the panel is normal. Checking the probe heat, which is left in auto. It can be manually selected if required, but we'll leave it in the automatic position for now. The electrical panel, which we've already looked at as part of the power up check, and again we have all normal indications. External power is supplying us with AC power to the AC buzz bars at the moment, and the amber fault lights in the generators normal as they're not running at the current time. The fuel pumps we're going to leave off until fueling is finished. The mode selector is in auto, and the hydraulic indications are normal. We wouldn't expect any lights at this stage. And now we can test the fire indications for the engines, it's pretty much the same check as the APU, except there is an additional feature. At the moment you can see that the engine 1 fire push button is in and guarded, the agent lights are out, and so if we press the test indication you can hear the continuous repetitive chime on the overhead speaker, the squib and discharge lights in each agent push button, which is normal, the red fire push button. We have a master warning light on the glare shield, an engine 1 fire indication on the ECAM, and the additional feature is the fire light on the engine panel. And if we select the master warning on the glare shield, the continuous repetitive chime finishes. So that's a successful test for engine 1. We're going to do the same for engine 2. Perfect. Audio control panel for the observer is usually selected on PA, and this is to ensure that the PAs are recorded on the cockpit voice recorder, and we'll select the volume into the medium range thereabouts. And we have no further white lights or abnormal indications on the rest of the panel, so the cockpit preparation check for the overhead panel is complete. So on the glare shield we're checking that we have the correct QNH setup on both sides. The QNH at Bristol today is 1012 according to the ATIS, so we have the correct QNH setup, and we're also going to make sure that we have it on the ISIS as well. ISIS, by the way, being short for Integrated Standby Instrument System. We also want to make sure that the flight directors are both selected on, and in the A320X little simulator feature here you can actually right click the flight director push buttons and both sides will come on. And we also have the 1FD2 indications here on the flight mode annunciator to show that both flight directors are selected on. With the flight directors selected on, we then have dashes in the speed window, dashes in the heading window and in the vertical speed window as well. And in the altitude window we can set our initial estimated altitude for the departure. Our departure today is going to be the BADIM 1 X-ray, and we're expecting runway 27 here at Bristol, and the initial climb for that departure is actually flight level 80, so we can select that on the FCP. We also want to make sure that the instrument brightness has been selected and that the instruments, in terms of the transfer option, are in the correct place, so PFD on the left, navigation display on the right. We can select the various features that we'd want on the navigation display, so we're going to select constraints, and this shows any FMGS routing constraints, altitude and speed on the initial departure routing. I'm going to have ARC for the departure, and we can select the range as necessary. We can also select the terrain on the navigation display if required. I'm actually going to do that on the first officer's side. And we're also checking on the ISIS to make sure that we have the correct readings, no flags, and the brightness has been set as well. The clock is normal and showing the correct time. Anti-skid and nose wheel steering is on. And coming down to the radios, we're going to select our initial frequencies. No air traffic control online at the moment, and as you can probably hear, there's a turboprop starting up around on the apron area, which is being a little bit noisy. I apologise for that. So we're going to select the Unicom frequency on this side. We'll have the emergency frequency on the other side for the time being, and we'd also use the second radio set to listen to the ATIS if required. I'm going to get my ATIS digitally, however. Audio control panel is normal. The INTRAD switch centered. We have VHF1. And we'll select the correct volume on that. And on the first officer's side as well. We'll have set in weather and turbulence. It needs to be off, as I said, in this stage, and the predicted wind shear needs to be off as well. We also need on the switching panel to make sure that all the various systems are in the normal position. The thrust levers need to be in the forward idle position. Mode selectors off, we've already looked at, and the master switch is off as well. And on the transponder we'll set the correct standby code of 2000. Altitude reporting we want selected on. TCAS mode we'll have in all. The ATC selector can be in 1 or 2. Usually I think if the first officer is flying then it's system 2, and if the captain's flying it's system 1. That's certainly a procedure that one airline uses. We'll use system 1. It's also important to make sure that the gravity gear extension lever is stowed. And that's it for the cockpit preparation check. Let's start setting up the FMGS.